Now, Colin Williscroft's feature in this week's Farmers Weekly's Newsmaker focused on Gerald Rys's extensive career and advocacy of pastoral agriculture and the research behind it. The Ministry for Primary Industries principal scientist became the recent winner of the Ray Brougham Trophy presented by the New Zealand Grasslands Association, and Gerald joins us now to share his career journey. Firstly, congratulations on behalf of all our listeners and viewers, Gerald. Quite rare for a public servant.
Yes, thanks for that, Sarah. It is quite different, and I was a bit humbled that the association chose a sort of core public servant this time round, somebody that hasn't been sitting at the lab bench or been in the field all of those years, but it was really appreciated.
Did you know Ray?
Yes, when Ray was actually just started as director of the Grasslands division of DSAR in those days. When I started as a young scientist in Taranaki, I was the district agricultural scientist there, and I had just come out of Massey. And Ray was well known throughout the world, basically, and in New Zealand. He was the guru of grassland science, and is still recognised as being one of those core people. But I was also a bit humbled when I looked down the list of people on the trophy, basically, when you see all your friends that you've known over the years there as well. And I've drank with most of them as well. So that was really pleasing.
Now, you started off your career, of course, growing up on a dairy farm in the southern Rotorua Lakes area. What was the turning point for you to head off into a career of academia?
It was actually my father, actually. He was very keen for me to get an education. So rather than taking over the farm, my sister took over the farm, and he said, go off to Massey and get a further degree, which I did. I went to Massey and got a Bachelor of Ag Science. That's a 4-year degree there, and I really enjoyed that. I was then sort of promoted by one of the professors there, Prof Watkins, basically, who was the head of the agronomy department, and he pushed me into the science area, basically. But in those days, MPI used to have HR people that went around the universities at the end of the year sort of looking for prospects to employ, and you either became a farm advisor or you became a scientist, depending on how well you did it at Massey, and I did well enough for them to push me into the science career path, and then I went up to Taranaki. And
what was it that you intrigued you around where the science was at the time in agriculture, and being able to provide, science-based evidence to policy making in the New Zealand's evolution of our grassland pastoral farming systems?
I didn't sort of realise it at that stage, I suppose, that the requirement for innovation in the grassland system, but MAF, as it was in those days, actually had this district agricultural science division, basically. So they had scientists in every region of the country, and that was their policy, to try and get science out to the farmers. And actually, by having scientists and technical people and doing research in the regions, they could actually then talk directly to the farmers. And that was part of that broader policy. And that was in the sort of early to mid-70s, I think it was. And so that policy, I thought, was a useful policy of getting stuff out there. We used to do national trials on phosphate and fertilisers and pasture species. So that's how we got the message out to farmers, and I think it's still a good way of doing it.
Over your multiple decade career, Gerald, in terms of farmers' understanding of, trial-based evidence, peer-to-peer reviews, these technical publications, and being able to have the confidence to trial new pastures and forages, what evolution have you seen?
I think what I have seen, though, is the evolution of a whole range of different means of doing it. So we're getting a lot more sort of media. Well, a lot of that's occurred in with social media, I suppose, in the last decade or so, and I've seen a big change in getting information out to farmers more rapidly than what we used to in our days. It's all. Well, I didn't have a computer on my desk when I started. I think I had an abacus or something like that. I think back long enough now, and so getting the information out there more rapidly, being up to date with it, getting it out there through media and a different range of means. But we still had good techniques such as demonstration farms. And I was involved in Taranaki, where I was involved with at least 3 different demonstration farms. So that was a key means by which we used to get farmers to see the latest technologies. We were working on the latest pasture species. The one in southern Taranaki was looking at species to control pests in those days. Grass grub was really bad in South Taranaki, and so we ran the Taranaki Research Station at that stage to look at that. So things have evolved. We don't tend to have as many field days and demonstration farms as we used to in those days. We could get hundreds turning up to those field days, but I don't think there is quite as many these days.
Oh, you've just done such a great job of communicating the science, Gerald. That's probably why. And looking through the long list of areas of research that you've been involved in, such as the drought master perennial ryegrass, the nitrogen fixation of white clover, and of course legume cultivation as well. What's been some of those real standouts that you are really proud of the work that you've been involved with?
Well, strangely enough, it was some of my early work where I worked with Peter Young from Rotorua, and it wasn't actually in grassland cultivars. It was drenching livestock with magnesium. And we've done some calculations on the work we've done, and we reckon it's been worth billions of dollars to the dairy industry, mainly because farmers now routinely use magnesium supplementation of dairy cows. There's less deaths, there's 10 to 15% greater milk production, and that's continued on, and farmers are still using that regularly today. So that was one of the first wins, I suppose, as it were in those days. But I think some of my other wins might be more around the establishment of these research stations. I've been involved in about 3 different stations that have been involved with over the years, and they are the conduit through which you do the research and get it out there. So actually establishing them, the Pukawa Research Station in Hawke's Bay was a classic example, right next to the main road. You always had to do that because you get the most farmers would see the new cultivars and their different colours and that from the road as they drove past. So that's been some of it. But some of the new cultivars that I've had over the years, including Drought Master, that was a win basically as well.
Climate change and the use of different varietals to be more drought tolerant and provide lower methane emissions is pretty hot topic at the moment, Gerald. And I've discussed it with many scientists on the program around the tools in the toolbox. What are we not maximising, and the lost opportunities, do you believe?
I think we're getting enough evidence base to prove some of these cultivars do have an effect now. We know that some of the forage kales and stuff like that actually do reduce methane emissions. We think that some of the grass species might do it as well. We're not. We have to do some more work on some of them still. But we are looking at inhibitors as well, just that you'd have to give to animals. It's not a species per se, and vaccines. But where we're making the biggest progress actually is in selecting animals for lower methane levels. And we're making some real progress there, particularly in sheep. And the whole program's now starting off on looking at dairy animals and beef animals as well. So hopefully that will get underway in the next 6 months or so.
You've sat in a very interesting position between science and policy, Gerald, and the likes of ryegrass and gene-edited ryegrass and having that national debate. What's your thoughts?
So this question would always come up in this sort of interview. Thanks, Sarah. If you look at it, I think it's important that we continue the research looking at some of these techniques. Otherwise, we will fall behind. But there needs to be a broader discussion on whether these things would be accepted broadly within New Zealand society. So we have to go through the normal processes of the legislation that we've got. We know that AgResearch is working on some cultivars at present to look at whether they can actually reduce methane and improve animal performance through their cultivars. So I think we need to progress the science. We need to see what's happening overseas all of the time, but we still need societal acceptance of these cultivars, otherwise it's not going to happen.
Sounding more like a policymaker than a scientist there, Gerald. Well answered. But when it comes to science not being able to catch up with policy, it really is a race and to get one before the other. Does it worry you?
No, I think we can, policy needs to build on the evidence base that's there, I would hope. And I think if things don't work out, then you look at change it when you do get new knowledge on what you're doing, and that does happen regularly as well. Science is a slow process, obviously, and dealing with biological systems where you've got all this variability of climate and genetics, and that also means that it's not going to be a quick answer all of the time. We've been working on the greenhouse gas issue for 15 years now, I think, trying to get to make progress, and we are making progress as we move forward and we understand what works and what doesn't work. And I think in the next few years we will see some progress on that. But we've got the new Zero Carbon Act with its standards there that we'll have to look at how we can meet them in the future.
And of course, the ultimate question around funding. Is there enough of it? And if there's not and we needed more, where would you help distribute it?
So funding is a perennial question. You should never ask a scientist whether there's enough funding, because you know what the answer is. Normally there's a limited funding, but I've been on the funding side of the equation where we're handing out the funding, and it's normally there's more good ideas than there is funding available. In terms of getting more funding, science has to stand in line with all the other elements that the government's got to, dish out its tax on, basically. So we have to see where it fits in the equation. Currently we're trying to cope with the COVID economy that we've got. Where does science fit in that? I think we try and work with what we do. There's a range of ways where there could be more funding through the Commodities Levies Act and a few other areas as well.
Thank you so much, Gerald, for taking the time to come on. Sarah's Country is, of course, this week's Farmers Weekly newsmaker, and Gerald Rys there, who has recently been awarded the Ray Brougham Trophy by the New Zealand Grasslands Association, an award that has humbled him in his win. And, of course, knowing Ray, he is certainly, from his extensive career in advocacy of our pastoral agriculture, a very, very well-deserved after having a chat to Gerald there.